Hi, my name is Kira, and this is Kira of All Trades on Fresh Factory TV. Today we are discussing terrifying trades. Straight out of the headlines or the front cover of your favorite murder mystery are lots of trades that some would consider to be downright terrifying. All we see are the headlines or the information that grabs your attention. But there are trades that are being done in the background that allow you to return back to your normal life and forget about the occurrences that you've seen or heard. So, on Cure of All Trades, Terrifying Trades, we are going to create our own scenario. Let's call it KOAT Murder Mysteries. So, in chapter 1 of our murder mystery, there must be a murder. So, there is a scenario where there is a scene that there is a body. So, the body is there, and the first person that you see that is on the scene is job number 1, trade number 1, that is terrifying. Trade number 1 is a coroner. So, a coroner assesses the scene and is responsible for determining whether the cause of death was natural or not, whether foul play was involved or not, and even in the case of a natural death, if someone has not been under the care of a physician within around 20 days previous to their passing, then a coroner is to also decide if even there is a natural death, what is the cause? A coroner's responsibility is to make a determination to put on the death certificate as to what is the poison, the injury, or the disease that caused the demise of an individual. So, terrifying trade is the coroner. So, as we go along into our Cure of All Trades murder mystery, the next person that we see here is the next person that's responsible for allowing this information to get researched properly. So let's guess that this body has been on the scene for an unknown amount of time. There's an individual who is trained to use 2 terrifying things. One is a dead body and also insects to determine how long that body has been on the scene. This next trade is a forensic entomologist. So a forensic entomologist's job is to use flies, fly larvae, other insects, ants, to determine by their growth and their processing how long this body has been at the scene. So for people who go missing and those kinds of headlines that you see in the newspaper, this person, this forensic entomologist, is responsible for being able to determine the duration that this body has been in its location with the use of insect, larva, insect body, and its processes of change in order to determine the length of time and amount of environmental exposure this body has been in a scene and therefore has been deceased. So, terrifying trade is a forensic entomologist. So, there are lots of forensic portions to this murder mystery. Lots of people in the sciences, lots of people with research backgrounds who have to determine information that is not all the way clear. So, in this Cure of All Trades murder mystery, the next trade that is terrifying would be a forensic pathologist. This person would be a person who is located anywhere between the crime scene and the morgue, who does the actual research on the body in the autopsy realm, that would be able to cut, investigate thoroughly the body of the victim in this case, or the person who passed away. So these autopsies can happen in a morgue. There are many tools that are required for this job. There are scalpels and water hoses to get rid of different pieces of debris. But the forensic pathologist is the person who is responsible for conducting a full research of the performance of the autopsy in order to get a full understanding about what happened. So when there are details given about the full length of what happened to the individual, were there 7 cuts, were there 3 burns, this forensic pathologist would be the one that performs this autopsy and gives all of the bitter details of what happened to this individual. So, terrifying trade. Next on this terrifying trades that we have discovered on the Cure of All Trades forensic files murder mystery is a forensic pathologist. Next, the scene of the crime where we were located, where we saw all of these things occur. There were pieces and parts and insects and potentially blood and guts and gore located at this crime scene. But once all of these people went away from the crime scene, they no longer thought about them. So there is a mansion that has a million rooms, and this crime scene took place in one of these rooms, and maybe in many rooms all the way across this multi-billion-dollar mansion with these 100 rooms. Maybe this crime scene has extended throughout the whole property. So what happens next to this property? There is the next terrifying trade who is responsible for cleaning up this mess. So the next terrifying trade is a CTS decon tech. So a decon tech is short for decontamination tech, and the crime scene is where this decontamination tech would operate. So there would be any level of things that could potentially contaminate someone else, whether they are body fluids, whether they are insects, whether there are germs. Someone has to be responsible for cleaning up the crime scene and making sure that it is returned back to a safe area. And the CTS decon tech is the one who's responsible for doing so. Their responsibility includes cleaning and disinfecting all the way down to the molecular level. So that's cleaning and disinfecting and ensuring that the scene is returned back in the cleanest manner possible, all the way down to a molecular level. So the crime scene is cleaned and returned to safety by a CTS decon tech. Next, as we've gone from the crime scene to the morgue with this victim and continued on and reviewed that the crime scene was cleaned, now this victim goes from the morgue to the next location. And the next location is to our next terrifying trade, which is a mortician. So, morticians are generally people who work with a funeral home individually. Some travel to different locations who have specialties, and their jobs are to prepare a body for either cremation or burial, with some having certain specialties. In general, a mortician is a person who takes out all of the bodily fluids of an individual, who replaces it with fluids such as embalming fluid, and does things like sew a person's certain things in place to ensure that they are able to be seen properly, and glue things together. And sometimes there are specialists who specialize in makeup, who specialize in hair. And all these morticians have a responsibility to ensure that they are taking care of these individuals in the most respectful way possible, to provide a service for these individuals as one of the last people that they come into contact with. So, our terrifying trade is a mortician. If someone decides that they're not necessarily looking forward to being cremated or buried, there are other options. It just depends on how far your imagination can go. So, our next terrifying trade is a cryonics technician. Some people may have never heard of a cryonics technician, but a cryonics technician is responsible with providing a vat or a container to submerge a recently deceased person's body, to get it as cold as possible with the use of liquid nitrogen, in a way that they intend to preserve this body for an extended period of time, meaning years, decades, maybe hundreds of years, with the intention and hope that one day this person's body can be exhumed, repaired, and revived to live again. This is terrifying to think with today's technology that this is a possibility. But again, a cryonics technician has a very important job, which is to provide hope that this is a possibility for the individuals who are participating. So they have to understand that although the technology may not be available today, by preserving the person's body in the correct way, that once the technology is available in tens or hundreds or thousands of years in the future, that they may possibly be able to preserve the body in a way that would allow it to be regenerated and repaired and enlivened again. A cryonics technician is our next terrifying trade. So, what about the person who did all of these terrible things to this victim? What happened to them? So they've gone and committed this heinous crime, and they have taken the steps to get caught, and now they are in the system. And one of the first people that this individual has to integrate with is our next terrifying trade, which is a psychologist. Maybe a psychologist is not the first trade that you would consider to be terrifying, but a psychologist's job is to evaluate the mental state, the perception, the cognition, the emotional and social processes of this individual who committed such a heinous crime. They ask questions, they allow the criminal to speak uninterrupted, they are able to do things like give accurate responses that are necessary to move the process forward, and have been trained to do this. As a terrifying trade, this is difficult because having an interaction with an individual that has a certain type of mind frame causes one to have to protect their own psyche while doing so. But as a terrifying trade, this also has to be done so that people can understand why, when, how these things occurred, so as to hopefully prevent them from happening again, and to provide data on similar situations. So, a psychologist is the next terrifying trade. So, some of the things that psychologists hear have got to be just mind-blowing. And one of the things that people who commit murders have said is that they started as children and they had some of the activities similarly in their childhood, but with animals. So, our next terrifying trade is a slaughterer. So, in order to get food onto your plate, there must be a slaughterer. Someone must take an animal from its alive state to its unalive state. A slaughterer's responsibility is to do this, perform this service. Side note, There are literally no places to receive training on how to become a slaughterer. There are no technical schools. There are no certificates that can be maintained because there's no guarantee that once a person is trained to do this job, that they are willing to actually perform the function of taking something from being alive to not being alive when it's time to perform this job. So there are no places to receive this training. The skills required are a steady hand and ability to stomach the things that must occur. So the next job on our list of terrifying trades is a slaughterer. And side note, if this is a slaughterer that's on a farm, they are responsible for making domestic animals like pigs and cows and chickens prepared for distribution, we'll call it. So one of the odd things is that in the case of sheep or lamb, that when it's time for slaughter, the lamb will cry. So that makes for a terrifying trade on our list. So back to this criminal. So this criminal has gone through their psychiatric evaluation with the psychologist, and now they are going to the system. They are participating in the prison system. And there is a person that they will interact with just the same, have conversations with and interact with on a daily basis, who doesn't necessarily have a full degree on understanding the psychology of criminals. And this person who has the next terrifying trade is a corrections officer, aka prison guard. So a prison guard's responsibility is to give instruction to prisoners to ensure that there is form and function and structure provided to prisoners inside of a prison unit. But one thing that is not often said is that every day as a prison guard, you have the gate of the prison closed behind you also. For any regular free person, that in itself is terrifying. So, terrifying trade next on our list is prison guard / corrections officer. One of the things that makes this trade so terrifying is that on a day-to-day basis, when there's not structure in place and instructions being given and things with extreme detail needed to be done, there's just regular time. There's just time in your cell or time outside in the yard, and corrections officers are there during all of those times. And at all of those times, there are prisoners who are pleading their case to those corrections officers. There are people who are intentionally intending to coerce those individuals. There is individuals that are connected with people on the outside that are being given instructions by those criminals to inform people about the whereabouts and activities and things like that about corrections officers. So that in itself is a terrifying trade, one that people find that they cannot keep for very long after going through the training, and some people decide to make a whole living from it because they have the capacity to do so. That makes for a very terrifying trade. So, this last person is a person that everyone sees. So whether this be your last day on death row as a criminal who has performed such a heinous crime, or whether it is a normal, everyday person, one of the last people that individuals will see or communicate with at their time of transition would be our last terrifying trade, which is only called from God, from my understanding, and you must be licensed to do so. It's a priest / preacher. So, a priest is a Catholic version, while a preacher is a Christian version of essentially the same job. Both a priest and a preacher perform religious events such as baptisms and communions and those type of regular religious things. But as the terrifying portion of this job, a priest or a preacher gives the last rites to individuals as they get ready to transition through this 3D realm into whatever other realm that there is. So, on people's deathbeds, there's liable to be many things that priests and preachers hear that this person has held until the very last seconds of their life. If it is a criminal who is on death row, who is saying what they have wanted to say this whole time, that could be a certain set of things. But this preacher or priest, this is their calling, or this is their life's mission. So while it might be terrifying to me, terrifying trades are personalized and each person has their own interpretation. But our last job, our last trade on terrifying trades is the priest or the preacher. As a priest, there are responsibilities that one has in my understanding of Catholicism, which is that the priest works as an intercessory between a regular person and God. So that seems like a very terrifying job to do because it sounds very big. In any case, all of these jobs are paying jobs. All of these are trades that one can follow through with in the case that they meet their desires, if it's something that they have interest in. But only this last one is called by God, especially. So, sounds especially terrifying for ones that are not necessarily doing it from the right intention. And it's most definitely a list of jobs that, as I mentioned, may not be terrifying for all. Obviously, there are people who don't find it terrifying because that's what they do for a living. So, thank you so much for coming to the show. This has been Cure of All Trades, Terrifying Trades Edition. Be sure to hit the like button on YouTube. Go to our YouTube channel, Fresh Factory TV. Take a look, thumbs up the video. Please be sure to watch our channels on Amazon Fire TV and Roku. Listen to it on audio, on all the audio podcasts, and please feel free to visit www.freshfactory.com for all the information on our next upcoming shows. Hope you got a lot out of today. These are very terrifying to me, but let me know what you think about these trades in the comments. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Bye.